Good evening, and welcome to the Miracle of Prosperity here on the New Thought Media Network. I am Reverend Jim Webb, Senior Minister of the Tacoma Metaphysical Chapel and author of the book The Soul of Prosperity, as well as others, including Prosperity from A to Z and creating your self-manifesting vision board. Every Sunday evening, we get together and we work together to support you in allowing all the prosperity that God wills for you that you are ready to accept. We work with you to support your creation of professional prosperity, where you have a wonderful job with wonderful pay, where you offer a wonderful service in a wonderful way. We work with you to achieve and experience relationship prosperity, where your relationships are supportive and uplifting and in harmony, as an outer reflection of your inner support for yourself, your inner harmony, and your willingness to continually uplift yourself to a higher vibratory rate. We work with you on family prosperity, healing old family wounds and patterns so that you might experience harmony with family and family joy. We work with you on financial prosperity so that your finances are no longer a source of worry or concern or struggle, but instead so that your finances are a source of joy and reflective of the infinite bounty of God that you allow. And of course, at the core of it all is we work with you on spiritual prosperity so that you feel the peace that passes all understanding, so that you feel connected to a great spiritual source and force, and that connection offers you insights, guidance, wisdom, protection, upliftment, and leads you and guides you to your greatest good. So these are many of the aspects of prosperity that we work with. And as Rumi said, it is not to find love, it is to remove the barriers to all the infinite love that exists. Our task is to remove all the barriers to the prosperity that God wills for you, for God wills your greatest good. And tonight we're going to work with a specific barrier that may inhibit your ability to experience prosperity. And the specific barrier that we're going to work with is family trauma. Now, this is an extension of some of the deep work we started doing last week, where we are going to work this evening with a dear person who I've known for probably a good at least 20 years now. That's Ifetayo White. And I could go on and on about Ifetayo's work. She's a Reiki Master. She's a teacher. She's a healer. And I call her a mama bear of mysticism. And the reason that I call her a mama bear of mysticism is that she, over the years, has mentored, coached, healed, taught, and supported a myriad of people in the metaphysical community, many of whom we all know. She's been their mentor, she's been their mother, she's been their guide, she's been their teacher, she's been their shining light, she's been their support, she's been their backbone, she's been their grounding. And she now runs a retreat center where she does her Reiki attunements, Reiki training, Reiki support, and all other types of spiritual support. So I was blessed a couple weeks ago to hear that she was back in the area, up from her South Carolina retreat, that she was back in the area, and she was working with a select number of people to heal family trauma. So I literally chased her down and asked, well, will you work with our folks? Because our spiritual family could really benefit from your work. And she was gracious enough to say yes. So I'm so honored to see you, Ifetayo, and thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much.
Oh, thank you so much, Reverend Jim. I'm honored to be here. I'm grateful that
Yes.
you invited me, that you tracked me down, and with such a beautiful invitation to join you this evening. Yeah.
Well, we are so glad you're here. You are one of the experts on so many modes of healing, and I was so impressed with your work on healing family trauma because that trauma can inhibit our willingness and our ability to allow our prosperity. But there may be some viewers who may not understand fully what family trauma is or how it can inhibit our prosperity. So, can you share with our viewers your view of what is family trauma?
Absolutely. Yes. Um, um, uh, my, I feel this is from Ife Tayo's heart and contemplation and experience that
Yes.
family trauma is passed on to us
Mm-hmm.
um, a couple of particular ways. And one is through our DNA,
Yes.
the memories um, of fear. And
Yes.
trauma is synonymous with fear,
Yes.
which I can get into later, but it is a fear response to a
Mm-hmm.
situation. So
Yes.
the fear, and I'm going to speak particularly about money and prosperity
Yes.
and abundance. And
Yes.
so if you can think of um, the possibility that this energy of fear of money, of wealth, of abundance has been passed on to all of us. I would have to say all of us to one extent to another, from one
Yes.
extent to another, through our DNA. It lives in us, okay? We
Mm-hmm.
can just, and I invite everyone to accept that as true, as the truth, because it is. So that's the first way. The second way is through the stories that our families
Mm-hmm.
have shared with us all of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
We learn from their stories of how they feel about prosperity, how our families feel about wealth, how our families feel about abundance and worthiness and unworthiness.
Mm-hmm.
So, to me, um, trauma, as I said
Mm-hmm.
before, is a fear response. It
Mm-hmm.
is also, we think of fight, flight, and freeze.
Mm-hmm.
Trauma is the freeze.
The freeze
When we,
response.
yes, it is. So
Okay.
think in terms of when you've been in a car accident
Mm-hmm.
and you've been hit from behind, and even
Mm-hmm.
with the seatbelt on, there is a freeze. Your body contracts and
Yes.
holds. It is frozen, and the
Okay.
memory as a body worker for since the 80s,
Yeah.
I've had experience with many people with physical who are holding physical trauma from accidents and
Mm-hmm.
also emotional um, trauma memories as well as ancestral or family trauma memories. So,
Okay.
yeah,
That really helps me. And
yes,
so, in a nutshell, there are two key sources of trauma.
yeah,
One is epigenetic, and
yes,
the other is environmental.
yes,
And it's fascinating to me anytime we talk about epigenetics, because it's my
yes,
favorite pastime these days, to realize that science is now catching up with spirit,
yes,
in that scientists are now studying epigenetics and how trauma or experiences
mhm,
show up in a specific person, and it creates subtle shifts in DNA
Yes.
And those subtle shifts in DNA are passed down to the
That's
next
right.
generation. I mean, we always knew this, but they
Yes.
called us quacks.
Yes.
And now that the scientists are studying it in the same way that 40 years ago they called Reiki quackery,
Yeah.
and now at an age they're all doing it. So that same thing is happening with epigenetics. So we
Yes.
now realize that there is a family connection
Yes.
between prior generations and their trauma and our own.
Yes.
And the
Absolutely.
other thing you said that's so powerful is that there is an environmental factor
Yes.
too. And I call this our miseducation
Hmm.
as a result of our environment.
Yes.
And we freeze. And let me put a face on this for you, Ife. Because that freeze response,
Hmm.
I want to put a face on that with a living example.
Yes.
Um,
Absolutely.
Years ago, I bought a brownstone, a 4-story brownstone
Hmm.
downtown. Now, I've always been a suburban guy with suburban homes with carpet everywhere you look.
Yeah.
So I bought this brownstone. I originally bought it to chop it up into apartments, but I loved it so much I couldn't bring myself to chop it up. So the only thing I could do was live in it.
Yeah.
So I had all this hardwood floor, and had nothing. I knew nothing to do of it. So I said, I've got all this hardwood floor. I need some carpets. So during the holidays, what I generally would do is go visit family in Pittsburgh, then go visit family in Ohio. Well, my family in Ohio, they were going to go somewhere else that I didn't want to go. And so I said, well, heck, I'll just fly back to DC. Well, the flight to Istanbul, Turkey was only $50 more than the flight back to Dulles. So I said, well, heck, I'll go to Istanbul and I'll buy all these carpets for pennies on the dollar. And I did. And I got all these beautiful carpets for pennies on the dollar, and I had a wonderful vacation in Istanbul at the same time.
I love it.
It was fabulous.
Yes.
But let me tell you what happened when I talked to my family about this.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes?
Yes. Oh,
I
yes.
talked to my family of origin about this, and their response hit me in a deep place that I
Mhm.
didn't even know that I had.
Yes.
And it was that deep place where I didn't even know there was terror, there was fright, there
Yes.
was shame, there
Yes.
was fear,
Yes.
because it was the ancestral fear of flying too close to the sun or something being unimaginable because they
Yes.
couldn't imagine somebody flying to Istanbul to buy carpets.
Yes.
And the other part of it was my fear that because my primal fear, because the family, we all see, especially the inner child within us,
Hmm.
sees the family as the source of life, the
Hmm.
source of support, the source of protection. And
Yes.
there's a primal fear that we will not survive without the family's approval and
Yes.
support. And so doing something as outlandish was clearly out of the bounds
Yes.
of my family's frame of reference,
Yes.
and therefore I had flown too close to the sun. And I felt all of this in my gut. And the response was an energetic freezing.
Mhm. Yes.
And so
Absolutely.
so I wanted to put a face on that because
Yes.
that was indicative. And I actually wrote a little bit more about this and how to work through this
Oh,
in my
good.
book, the
Yes.
Soul of Prosperity. But I
Yes.
wanted to put a face on what we were talking about in
Absolutely.
living example because
Yes.
we've all probably had examples of this and we didn't realize, hey, I went into freezing.
Hmm. Yes.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
hits you. It hits you in a way that it's a stun. It's stunning. It's
Yes.
stunning. Yes. And so the freeze comes into our bodies or our minds, really, our minds or
Mm-hmm.
and our bodies when we are
Mm-hmm.
stunned that way. It
Mm-hmm.
affects us.
Mm,
It really does affect us.
mm,
And
yeah.
and these are the this is where the invitations lie. This
Mm,
is where these places are where the invitations lie to peel back the onion, peel back the onion, peel back the onion to heal those places that of shame, those
mm-hmm.
places of because I am not behaving the way my family behaves, or I'm not
Yes.
behaving the way that my family believes um, I should behave,
Yes.
and the fear, all the fears of being outcast because I'm doing something different, or I believe differently, or I believe that I can do this and others don't see it that way. There are just many examples
Mm-hmm.
um, of trauma, how trauma begins in us.
Yes.
So, yes. So, and actually, what you said earlier, Reverend Jim, it made me think, which was the first time I thought of this, of nature and nurture. Nature
Yes.
and nurture, the epigenetics and the genetic part of it and the experiential part of it.
Mm-hmm.
So what we learned in our being nurtured early in our lives, the stories, the experiences that are shared with us of,
Mm-hmm.
poor Uncle Willie lost everything he had when he
Yes.
decided to go in business for himself. He should have
Yes.
gone into the federal government, like I told him. You know,
Mm-hmm.
all
Yeah. Get
all
one
of
of those good jobs down in the mill.
that's exactly. So, yeah. So those are, yeah, nature and nurture. We
Yes.
family trauma we inherit,
Mm-hmm.
and we also learn. We
So,
also
so that, and that is a pernicious combination
yes,
that seeps into our souls and
yes,
saps us of the awareness of ourselves
yes,
as holy, beloved, infinite receptacles for God's infinite love that can take infinite forms in a myriad of ways that
yes.
manifest as prosperity in all ways.
Absolutely.
So we get stuck in
Absolutely.
so we get stuck in our stories
Yes.
and we forget our potential for our glories.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's then discuss, and that's just one kind of family trauma. Now I know you do a lot of counseling, you do a
Mhm.
lot of support work, and you've done this for so many years. What are some of the other typical ways that family trauma shows up that you've observed? Because this may apply to many of our viewers as well.
There, oh, it's it's myriad. I have to share that I did work in mental health for 10 years,
Yes.
so I've been really witnessed many stories. In addition
Yes.
to, of course, my clients and my family, my
Yes.
children, and even my grandchildren.
Yes.
Um, the fear. Let's if we can keep it in the context of trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Trauma always produces fear, or it could actually. What is it, the chicken or the hen? But
Mm-hmm.
the chicken or the egg.
Mm-hmm.
Trauma and fear go together. Let's put it that way. Trauma and
Yes.
terror go together. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so um, when we have individuals who are um, are terrified of um, of relationships, or we have individuals who are terrified of um, of moving ahead in their jobs. I say it simply that way, of taking promotions, of assuming more responsibilities.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the it there are, you can often go back to some incident that they remember someone talking about, or it's an innate feeling. But if they talk to family members long enough, they will hear, perhaps not all the time, of years ago, decades ago, centuries ago, of of a relative, a close relative, a parent or grandparent that had a failure, where they were traumatized and the family was traumatized. Therefore, this the genetics have been passed
Mm-hmm.
on to me. So
Yes.
I'm fearful. I'm fearful of people who don't look like me, who don't look like
Yes.
my family. That
Mm-hmm.
is stemmed in trauma. that is
Mm-hmm.
stemmed in fear, that is stemmed in trauma. Um, the fear of, well, people who don't look like me, other cultures, um, the unfamiliar, say, traveling to countries that are unfamiliar, breaking out of boxes in so many ways. The
Yes.
fear, the fear of coming out of the familiar. Um,
Yes.
that it can go on,
Okay.
and
So
you
basically, we, due to family trauma, we can be terrified to accept our prosperity.
yeah,
That's the basic premise. And
yes,
so, how can we then release, heal, transform, transmute, dissolve, deny the terror so that we can accept our prosperity? And we have one question on that so far, and on the other side of the break, we're going to handle that one question, but I know others may have questions pertinent to them as well. So when we come back after the break, we're going to answer your questions on how can I release the conscious or unconscious terror that keeps me from accepting my prosperity. We've got one question already, and we'll get to that one first, but there may be others. So while we're on break, type your questions into the comments box, and we will work with them here on the New Thought Media Network.
Please help us say thank you to our organizational sponsors and donors, including the Hefferland Foundation, Affiliated New Thought Network, International New Thought Alliance, Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown Atlanta, New Thought Philadelphia, Planned Happiness Institute, Summit Center for Spiritual Living, Center for Spiritual Living on the Lake, Unity Spiritual Center Kitchener, Om Center for Spiritual Living, Center for Spiritual Living North Jersey, Unity of Savannah, Center for Spiritual Living Seattle, and all of our individual donors and sponsors. Thank you for being a part of the New Thought Media Network. Please come be you.
Choice, your creative superpower. We have the power to manifest as we dedicate attention to our thoughts, but often miss opportunity to achieve the greatest good. Your superpower is waiting to be unleashed to unlock a fuller, more rewarding world for all. Join us every Thursday at noon Mountain Time for Choice, your creative superpower with Zoe DeMuro.
Watch me change when you change the way you look at things. The things you look at change. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
And we're back here on the New Thought Media Network with the Miracle of Prosperity and Ifetayo White. We're discussing healing family trauma for prosperity so that family trauma will no longer cause us to block, reject, or run away from the prosperity that God wills for us. Almost as if God is chasing us down, trying to tackle us and saying, I've got this love for you, I've got this peace for you, I've got ease for you, I've got joy for you, I've got fulfillment for you. And our trauma is causing us to run away from it because it is unfamiliar to us. So we have some questions, and we welcome even more of your questions, although we know that every question asked is for everyone who is viewing us tonight. The first question we're going to go with, we're going to start with an example that she mentioned of buying a $2,000 couch, which wasn't really the one she wanted. The one she wanted was $3,500, but her family just couldn't wrap their minds, apparently, around her spending that much for a couch. So she, I call it sacrificed in order to satisfy others' expectations of her, and bought the $2,000 couch that she wasn't enamored of. And then her follow-up question is, how does one get out of a family financial control and abuse situation? So what would you have to say about that, Ifetayo?
That's an awesome question. Um, that and that particular question is, I think. Well, I don't want to say I think it is. It is certainly an example of trauma, family trauma. There's so much fear that that was in this question, this example and question. Um, I have a philosophy of life,
Mm-hmm.
and my philosophy of life is that we must follow our heart.
Mm-hmm.
We must follow our heart above any outside influences. So, whatever it takes, whatever it takes for us to um, gird ourselves, strengthen ourselves inwardly, and there are tools to do that.
Mm-hmm.
It requires practice,
Mm-hmm.
but we are the ones that have to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So, the question sounds, I don't, it doesn't, it's not simple. Okay. I will say
Yes.
that. If it is a current situation that you're living in where there is financial control and abuse, it will not be simple. But the if we practice the tools that
Mm-hmm.
strengthen us from the inside, we will
Mm-hmm.
have the courage to
Yes.
follow our hearts. What does my heart say? Does my
Yes.
heart say that um, I can have a conversation with the person or people involved, and that perhaps that will change their outlook? Or does my heart say I have to leave this situation, and
Yes.
then I have to make it on my own?
Yes.
So yes,
And
it,
and what I find is that the heart is the light within you, the love within you that is your true essence.
yes, it
And
is.
by following it, we listen to it. By
Yes,
following it, we nurture it. By
yes,
following it, we strengthen it. By following it, we realize its connection to the infinite source of love. For it is a part of, and never has it been apart from, that infinite source of
yes,
love. And as we follow our hearts in that way, it strengthens us so that what we looked for in a family member, love, approval, protection, when we follow our hearts, we feel that coming directly from the source. So they have less and less power over us.
yes,
So we then have the strength to either have that conversation because
yes,
we no longer fear that their abandonment will lead
yes,
to our death,
yes,
or we have the power to move away from them because
yes,
we know that what we need to survive energetically, spiritually, emotionally comes from the source that we have connected our heart to.
yes,
So I love your response, Ifetayo, of nurturing your inner light,
yes,
which gives you the strength, the peace, the guidance, the will, and the wisdom to allow the heart of love that you are, to accept love in all the forms that love takes as all forms of prosperity.
Yes.
So the answer
Thank
is
you. I
basically,
love it.
I love working with you. It's so out of joy.
And
So
one of the things I want to add to this, Reverend Jim, this conversation about the
yes,
heart and
yes,
following the heart, listening to the heart, we can start in small steps.
yes.
Just start small. Just
Hmm.
say on every day, what does my heart want to do
Uh
about
huh.
this? It could be as small as deciding what to eat, uh,
Hmm.
deciding to take a nap,
Uh
deciding
huh.
everything. What does my heart want me to do? And this builds the
Mm.
muscle. This builds that
Yes,
that spiritual muscle. But we don't have
yes.
to just jump in and say, "Oh, I'm just going to follow my heart" on
Uh
those
huh.
big, hard eh, um, places, such as the example that our viewer brought forward. That's a big one. So it
Yes.
it might not, if we haven't been working that muscle, then
Hmm.
it might require some practice. It's going to require
Yes.
practice.
Yes. In
Yeah.
Intervisions, there was always this exercise called the ring toss.
Mhm.
And it was a wonderful illustration of this. The ring toss was this: if you had a stake and a ring, and the stake was only a foot away, you could always toss the ring onto the stake.
Mhm.
But if the stake were 30 feet away, you couldn't. So why not take 30 little tosses instead of one toss 30 feet
Yeah.
that would miss?
Yes.
So do a ring toss.
Yes.
Sit with your heart. You
Yes.
are important. You're more important than you're more important than the Today Show and what who Robin Roberts or whoever's on it now is wearing. You're more important than somebody calling you on the phone. Sit with your heart.
Yes.
Listen to your heart. And what you're going to find, which is fascinating, is that your heart is at one with the heart of God.
Yes.
And for example, A Course in Miracles, lesson 49, God speaks to me throughout the day. When you listen to your heart, not only do you hear your heart, you hear the voice for God and the good God wills for you. And and just like A Course in Miracles, I will walk at one with God in my holiness. You start walking with that divine oneness with God. You start walking with that blessed assurance of God. You start walking feeling always that you are loved, feeling never that you are abandoned. You start walking with more peace. You start walking with more clarity. You start walking with more confidence. And the little steps asking, what does my heart want? What does God think about this? What is the truth God would have me know now? Which invites God to continually speak to you throughout the day and to offer you the blessed assurance that you want, that our hearts desire. Little steps.
Yes.
And we can do that. And we can be free of some of the trauma that might have caused us to be bullied or victimized financially by our families.
Thank you.
Thank
Beautiful.
you.
Thank you,
Thank
Reverend
you.
Jim.
Thank you, Ife. What a wonderful thing. Now we had another question, and it was about concern. You know, every family has secrets, right? Um, my parents and that whole generation, they have the last one of them passed on. And so some of the family secrets kind of started spilling out that everybody knew but didn't talk about since the
Yes.
50s, 40s,
Yes.
whatever. Every family has secrets. Um, Now, one of our viewers has the following question: how to overcome trauma? The one old way that plagues me still is we don't tell our crazy family business outside. What say you about that, Ife?
Well, I think that is in alignment with what you just shared about keeping secrets. And
Uh-huh.
um, as we have evolved
Mm-hmm.
um, into this day, this new age, this day, then we have learned of the harm that comes from keeping secrets. That has been one of the greatest harms within families of not telling the truth, not being honest, not being forthright, so that those who wondered, particularly children, they become confused. There's a
Yeah.
confusing because they can sense energetically that something is not right here. But the
Yes.
words that are coming, or the no words that are coming from the adults, set us up in a way that also carries through our lives when we don't trust, we're mistrusting.
Hmm.
um we cannot sense. Some of us have not been able to develop a sense of discernment around who is telling me the truth. Is this the truth? There have been some people who have been traumatized to that point.
Hmm.
Um, and so now, the last young lady, the question that came up about telling family business outside of the home. I think that's how her question
Yes.
was. And the the request, I guess it is. It's more than a request. It was a demand in most families that you do not talk about what happens in this home.
Hmm.
Therefore, lots of abuse
Hmm.
was happening on all
Yes.
the levels of spiritual abuse, emotional, physical, mental. Um, Abuse was happening um, because we weren't allowed to talk about it. We could not
Yes.
tell anybody. And that was one
Yes.
of the ways that the abuser was protected by admonishing the victim, do not tell anybody about this. And there were
Yes.
often others in the home who knew, who kept the secret, who
Mhm.
as Judy is now saying, when she asked her mother questions, she was always pushed aside. It was pushed aside. And
Mhm.
so these were the many of the behaviors of our families, of our parents, of our grandparents. We all, I'm assuming, at um, those of us who are anywhere from 55 on, maybe 60, have grew up in families that it was rare
Right.
to grow up in a family where where there was openness, where there was
Yes.
love, love
Yes.
meaning in communication and being open,
Yes.
in understanding energy. And I don't want to say it there wasn't so much understanding of energy, but there's vibration,
Yes.
there's
We didn't
vibe.
understand. We didn't understand the vibe that was being passed down when a family member kept a secret, and the vibe was shame. The
Shame.
vibe was something's wrong here. The vibe
Yes,
was something's wrong with you because he's
yes,
not really your father, even though I'm insisting that you tell him you call him
yes,
daddy.
yes,
And we and so the child is likely traumatized, and as
yes,
you said, and I want to bring this out, the child learns distrust
yes,
instead of trust. The
yes.
child is not assured, the child is insecure. The
Thank you.
child is not enterprising because the child does not trust the world. And so
That's
the
right.
child does not try, does not ask, and therefore does not receive. So these are some of the downsides of that sort of trauma. And our task as adults, one of the ways that we can address this, and we seem to keep coming back to this, is by healing those parts of us that have been traumatized by family situations.
Yes,
Understanding that within us still lives the vibration of that traumatized child, the vibration of that child that has been lied to, the vibration of that child who is unsure and insecure, the vibration of that child who
yes,
did not feel important enough to tell the truth.
Yes.
And so those parts of our energy still exist within us.
Yes.
And our task is to sit them down with God.
Thank you.
And what do I mean by sit them down with God? I mean sit in meditation, sit in prayer, sit in opening to the divine healing energy and light that is in infinite supply. And with my 5 favorite words, God, I let you in. God, I let you into this part of me that didn't learn to trust. God, I let you into this part of me that fears that the world is lying to me. God, I let you into this part of me that is afraid to go forward because I don't know what's on the other side of that door, because I don't trust what's out in the world, because of these childhood experiences. God, I let you in to this trauma. God, I let you into this pain. God, I let you into this fear. God, I let you into this doubt. And as we let God in, we let that out. And there's a chapter 9 in my book, The Miracle of Prosperity, that talks about the release of the old energy that creates a void or a vacuum so that the new energy of light can flow in. And when we say, God, I let you in, the light of God flows into those places that have been traumatized, and it brings peace, it brings comfort, it brings embrace, it brings healing. And it seems like all of our discussions are getting back to that point.
And what I love that you said, and I'm going to piggyback on that too, Reverend
Yes,
Jim,
yes,
trusting ourselves. What about
yes.
that piece? Trusting, we have learned not to trust ourselves from trauma.
Mm,
We have
yes.
learned that my intuition is wrong.
Mm,
I'm not really feeling that truth because
mm-hmm,
someone has lied, and
mm,
we were raised to believe
mm,
that we could not trust what we were feeling, even in the
mm-hmm,
face of someone sh- withholding, or
mm-hmm.
lying. So, so yes, the mistrust of the outer world, which certainly is a trauma response and will keep us stuck,
Mm-hmm.
and also a mistrust of our own inner knowing. And
Yes,
that, therefore, practice, as you said earlier, practice sitting with our hearts, listening to the voice of God,
yes,
listening to our own intuition. Practice, 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 and take those baby steps, take those tiny steps at first until grow we grow our the trust of our own
yes,
inner voice, which
yes,
is the voice of the divine,
yes,
speaking to us,
yes.
communicating with us. Um,
Absolutely. Yes.
yeah.
Now we got
So
another question,
yes,
and we have a question and a comment by Mignon Hooper. The comment was that she was raised by a foster mother who came up in the Depression, which
yes,
is, and that foster mother had a consciousness of lack that
yes.
showed up in counting every penny and working with thrift stores. So, how does Mignon, which was the follow up question after she gave that background, how does Mignon develop or cultivate her own prosperity consciousness? And I'd like to take a stab at this first to give you a chance to catch your breath.
Yes.
In my book, The Prosperity from A to Z, which is kind of like the Cliff Notes version of the Miracle of Prosperity, every chapter, every chapter, and there's like, it's only 40 pages long, you could read it in one day, but A is for abundance. And one of the exercises I have in that is we have to teach ourselves abundance if we have been taught lack. And one of the exercises I use is the idea that has been drilled into our consciousness that money doesn't grow on trees. And in the chapter called A is for Abundance, yes, it does. Trees are made of wood. Wood pulp is one of the ingredients for money. So money does grow on trees. And when you look in the spring and everything seems barren, but then you see these buds popping out. And then within another month and a half, you see Billions of leaves where nothing existed before. And when you realize that every plant, if you take a cutting of it, you literally multiply that plant. Just those physical examples and immersing ourselves in those physical examples re-educates and reorients us to a prosperity consciousness versus a lack consciousness.
Yes.
And one of the things I often suggest is in your journal, and that's why in my church we do prosperity stories. Journal all those ways that you have seen God come through for you. Journal all those, quote, little miracles. Because every time you journal one, you place yourself in the consciousness of those miracles.
Yes.
So we can reteach ourselves prosperity, even if we've been miseducated about it because of others' experiences that don't necessarily have to be our own.
Yes.
What say you about that, Ife?
Absolutely. 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 I say that 3 times because it so resonated with me what you just shared. I love the example of the trees. I too was told growing up that money doesn't grow on trees.
Mm,
I had expansive vision for myself
mm,
and my life and it as a
yes.
little girl, and that's when
Mm-hmm,
I began to hear that I lived an illusion,
mm-hmm,
and I had to re-educate myself about who I truly am.
mm-hmm,
That I am not only a child of God, I'm made in the image and likeness of God. I
yes.
am, and that all of these all of these ways that were there were really ways that our family, their fears were showing up, their
Yes.
fears for us.
Mm-hmm.
Often they had the consciousness that they were doing the best for us by hiding hiding truths, by telling us that
They
making
thought
us
they were
okay.
protecting us for something we weren't
That's
ready to hear.
that's exactly
He ain't your daddy.
that. So, um, the journey for me and for all of us is to return to who we truly are,
Yes.
and that means that to undo
Yes.
all of those stories about ourselves
Yes.
that really are not true. So knowing who we
Absolutely.
are, number one,
Mm-hmm.
knowing who we are is number one.
Yes.
Who are we?
And
Yes.
yes, and we know who we are when we experience ourselves as we are. And let
Yes.
me just button this up a little bit. We are beloved of God. We are not our labels. We are not our past. We are not our experiences. We are not our trauma. We are not our ego defenses, our ego responses, or the sword and shield that we believed that we had to wield in order to make our way through the world as we have seen it as traumatic. So when we sit with God and we connect with, contact, nurture, and experience ourselves as light. When we feel the calm of that light, when we feel the grace of that light, when we nurture that part of us, our divine essence, and when we feel that connection between our internal, intrinsic, eternal divine essence and its connection with the infinitely eternal, infinitely loving, infinitely powerful, infinitely compassionate, infinitely creative source. And through that process, we continually nurture our connection to that source and become vessels through which that source will flow. We experience ourselves as the holy, beloved Christ beings we were created to be, and all those limits and all those condemnations and all those doubts and fears about that little guilty person that we thought we were, disconnected from the source, fall away as we recognize, realize, and remember ourselves as holy, whole, beloved, deserving children of the light. All of the other stuff falls away. And the more we nurture this part of us, the more this part of us emerges, overshadows, heals, dissolves, and transforms the fear part of us, the guilt part of us, the shame part of us, the part of us that has been traumatized by family patterns, family secrets, family abuse, family dysfunction. Because we've learned to function, live, breathe, walk in God, in light, in love, and in truth. So the key, it sounds like that we're coming to, Ife, is we can heal family trauma by sitting with the great healer God and allowing God's light, God's love, God's wisdom, God's guidance, God's presence to move to us, through us, embrace us, infill us, express through us. And we become the beloveds of God, no longer hampered, distorted, or diminished by family trauma. So we're going to go to break right now. We're going to come back and chat with, we have a few surprises for you. So we're going to go to break on the New Thought Media Network, and we'll be back.
New Thought Media Network is on the rise. We're looking to grow with you. Do you have technical media experience or perhaps a desire to learn? Are you willing to volunteer your precious time and attention? We share this message to benefit all. If you possess a computer with a camera and a microphone, we will share our knowledge with you. Behind the scenes or being the star, let us bless our one. Contact us at info@ntmedia.org.
One last thing. Ife, you do family counseling, you do counseling, healing, support work, is that correct?
Yes.
Oh, good. And they know how to contact you, right?
Yes. I
Okay.
think the website was listed here. Yeah. There you
Yes.
go.
Okay, beautiful. So what else are you up to these days?
Uh, well, forever teaching Reiki and forever
Mm-hmm.
teaching Reiki not only as a hands on healing tool, but also as a way of remembering our connection with the
Yes.
divine, as being channels of that life force
Of the
energy.
divine.
So I teach nonstop.
Yes.
I am also hosting a silent retreat in
Mm-hmm.
September. I love silent retreats.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this is the fourth one that I've held at my place.
Oh,
And
wonderful. And so
yeah,
people can get more information on that from your website, correct?
that's absolutely right. So,
Okay,
yeah.
beautiful.
And what about
That's
you, Reverend Jim? What are
Well,
you?
I've got a new class coming up on July 10th, Speaking with Spirit, and and that helps people to make a deeper connection with Spirit.
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
also have a class called Ask Spirit anything, where you can ask Spirit any questions you have and get the answers, get specialized prayers for you, etc. All that's available on my website too. The class is 90% full, so there are a few more openings. Check out my website. Get in touch with me if that is something that is of interest to you. But the slots are going fast. But there's always an opportunity to audit the class if you can't participate because the class gets sold out or because you can't make it on either a Monday or a Thursday night. You can audit the class and get the recordings as well. So that's what I'm up to, but I'm glad we've been up to this together tonight. Thank you so much for being such a wonderful guest, Ifetayo.
Thank you.
And we look forward to having you back again here on the Miracle of Prosperity on the New Thought Media Network.